You know, when I was growing up, my father worked as a vet, and he had a surgery attached to our house, a little building where he saw the clients, and for years he didn't have a receptionist, and so that folk just packed into that waiting room with all their dogs and cats and just queued up to see him. And sometimes that was a very long wait because he was so busy. And I used to love coming back and walking into that waiting room and walking right past that queue and straight in to talk to my father. That was the privilege of being his son. I didn't have to spend my life waiting to see him because I was born of him. You know, the life God has for you and I, the life he calls us into, is not a life of waiting religiously in a queue, obeying the rules of the waiting room in order to one day qualify ourselves to enter his presence. If you only know God as your manager, then you're living as if your hope is in your behavior in the waiting room. But to know God as Father is to know that his presence is not your goal. His presence is not the finishing line. His presence is your life, for you were birthed from him. No man can see this except by the Spirit of God. To see by the Spirit of God, to see as the Father sees, is to see that heaven above is not your goal. It is your starting place, for you were born from above. Now, it was never God's intention to leave you with the idea, believer, or to leave anyone with the idea that they can birth such a life themselves, to leave you trying to produce a name for yourself or a life for yourself. He always saw such a life as striving and toiling. He always saw such a life as evil. When folk asked Jesus what they had to do to gain this life of God, this eternal life, he was always careful not to give them something to do, not to point them to themselves, but to point them to the Father's doing, what the Father had done. And what the Father has done is give his Son. He has given you his life in his Son. Receive his Son, you receive his life. Receive his Son's life as your life, and you can stop trying to make a life for yourself and start living the best life it's possible to live, the life of a perfectly loved Son, the life of Christ.